how many more squares must be shaded so that the ratio of the unshaded squares to the shaded squares becomes 1 to 5? Right? So do take note, this kind of question is very common in paper 1, okay, especially for P5 end year exam paper 1. They like to set such questions whereby they give you a diagram and the diagram has smaller shapes in it. Within some smaller shapes, they shade some and then they ask you how many more squares to be shaded. Okay, very common. All right, so for such question, what we can use is when we record down the data, we can use a before change after method. All right, why? Because this diagram clearly shows you the before. Okay, whatever is here is at first. This is your before. And you can actually create a ratio because I've shaded, I've non-shaded, which I can count. And this 1:5 will be your after. You want the ratio after that to become 1 to 5. Okay, so how many more squares to be shaded? That would be the change. So for such a question, use a before change after diagram to help you solve. Okay, so let's record that down first. So for my before, I will have shaded to unshaded. So you need to go and count, all right? So a quick way to count is shaded is just 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Unshaded, just use the total minus the shaded. Okay, that'll be faster. So this is a 6x4 rectangle. 6x4 is 24 squares altogether. 24 minus 5 will be 19. 19 unshaded squares. Okay, just a quick tip to teach you how to count quickly. So this is your before. Now the change, we draw an arrow. So how many more squares to be shaded? Now, you want shaded squares to increase. So shaded squares will be plus question mark. Now, what happens to the unshaded? All right. So some of you think that the unshaded no change. Actually, that's not true. When you shade squares, okay, you're using the same diagram. When you shade more squares, your unshaded squares naturally decrease by the same amount also, right? Because it's in the same total squares, in the same diagram, that we're using. We're not adding on more squares behind it, behind adding more rows or behind add columns. We're just using the same diagram to shape more squares, which means unshaded squares naturally will decrease by the same value. Okay, so do not forget about this. After that, I want my ratio to be 1:5. All right, be careful. Unshaded to shaded. Unshaded is 1, shaded is 5. Make sure how you put the numbers accordingly to the right headings. Okay, so once this is done, you can now go on to identify the common base because I have two ratios. Okay, so my common base means what should stay the same throughout the whole thing. Will my shaded stay the same? Obviously not. I have increased the shaded. Why would it stay the same, right? What about my unshaded? Will it stay the same? Obviously not, because my unshaded dropped. Okay, decreased. And what about the total? Okay, so think about it. Your total will be the same because I'm using the same blocks over here, okay, to do my before change after. So my total squares will not change in the before and the after. So total remains unchanged. So let's include the category total. Don't forget to make them the same multiple and underline your common base. So once your common base is done, okay, you would like to find out what's the value to use, the usable value. Now for this question, they did not give us any value. No usable value, only these units and then this diagram, and then that's about it. All right. But honestly, it doesn't matter because whatever I have here, 5 and 19, is already my actual number of squares here. Whatever I have here, 24. 24 is also the actual number of squares. 20 and 4, I want actual 20 shaded squares in the end. I want 4 unshaded squares in the end over here. Okay, so you just need to observe the change. All right, straight away, just go straight to observe the change. Now, to observe the change, you will just look at either the shaded or the unshaded. All right, so I think let's just focus on the shaded, easier to relate to because the question asks for how many more squares to be shaded. So look at your shaded at first, look at your shaded in the end. Shaded at first is 5, shaded in the end must be 20. So simply subtract 20 minus 5 to find out the number of squares to be shaded more.